It's for me a special privilege and honor to welcome you back, Mr. President. I don't have to introduce you anymore to this audience. I think you convinced everybody with your personality and with your vision in the session which just proceeded this session here. I want to announce, by the way, that we opened an account, and you find for the great initiative which was taken during the last session, and you find the details on our website. Mr. President, you announced a period of change when you arrived in office, and you have certainly delivered on that. I recall your speech 2 years ago, when many here in the room were skeptical what policy you really would pursue. And as we all know, the results have been very impressive. And we can say Brazil is back. You have, Mr. President, for your entire life been a champion of fairness and equality. Mr. President, your unwavering support of poverty alleviation has been well heard by the international community and particularly also in this hall. High on your national agenda is to help, to lead Brazil towards the fuller recognition of its rightful place in the international community, and certainly you have our support for this undertaking. We now look forward to hearing your specific comments on the theme of this annual meeting, taking responsibility for tough choices, and of course, we are particularly looking forward to hear from you your success story and how you will continue your leadership of this great country, Brazil. The floor is yours.
Senhor Klaus Schwab, fundador e presidente.
Mr. Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, dear friends, I come back to the World Economic Forum in Davos after 2 years. As for the first time, I come directly from the World Social Forum. In Porto Alegre, I discuss initiatives from civil society to make it feasible the Millennium Goals against hunger and poverty. And as in the World Social Forum, here too, I carry the same agenda of the challenges of seeking a social order that has more fairness. We don't want to ignore ideological differences, but we have to recognize that there are problems in the world that affect all of us. Brazil is doing its share to reclaim that missing link between social fairness and economic development is the strategic goal of my government. Brazil has managed to achieve stability and went back to growth, economic growth. And I remember that when I was here in January of 2003, there was a mix of fear, uncertainty, of that a former lathe operator could do in the presidency of a country like Brazil. And on that occasion, we announced some of our pledges. The first thing that we undertook in Brazil so that things could start out and to improve from the beginning was to undertake some reforms that we understood were necessary and very important so that to make things happen in the way that Brazil needs things to happen. We undertook 2 major reforms the tax reform and the Social Security reform. And more recently, we passed a bill, the PPP, Public-Private Partnership Bill. And we also passed a bill that approves the judiciary reform, a new bankruptcy law, a new patent law was also passed, and innovation bill was also passed. And together with all that, we also built and developed a regulatory framework in the energy sector and also in basic sanitation. We developed this framework, a regulatory framework. The results of all these policies that were followed by my government meant, after many years, that the Brazilian economy would go back to growth and growing 5%. And Brazil's country risk is at its lowest point in the last 7 years. Inflation that was 12.5% in the year 2002 went down to 7.2% in the year 2004. The debt in the public sector was reduced from 55% of the GDP in the year 2002 to 53.7% in the year 2004. We also had a record in exports, $96 billion in our exports, with a record surplus of $33 billion in our foreign trade. Brazilian exports grew in 2 years 60%, and having reached the $96 billion in our foreign trade. Industrial production in the year 2004, from January to February, grew 8.3%. The foreign direct investments, FDIs, has reached $10 billion, and in the year 2004, and it went up to $18 billion compared to 2003. So we made the decision to make Brazil assume the responsibility to have a strong policy towards building infrastructure to give the outflow of development that Brazil will reach from here onwards. And we gave priority for this year the issue of improving our railroad systems, our highway systems, our ports and airports, without which our production will not manage to will manage to flow domestically or flowing from out Brazil to other countries. The most important fact that I could mention is that this economic growth made it possible that the unemployment rate would fall from 12.9 in the year 2003, went down to 9.6 in the year 2004. And we generated during this period 2,100,000 new jobs in just 2 years in my administration. But even more important, that when I came here, I launched the program, the Zero Hunger program, and I announced that that would be the top priority in my government. And we created in Brazil a program called Bolsa Família, a family stipend that is part of the Zero Hunger program. And we have ended now on December the 31st of the year 2004, reaching 6.5 million families, which is the equivalent of more than 20 million people. Until the December of this year, 2005, we will reach 8.7 million families, and at the end of the year 2006, if God makes it possible, we will reach we will have reached all people that live below the poverty line, according to the Statistics Bureau in Brazil. We undertook some measures that were quite interesting, and we had some experiments. Another experience that was very interesting and that put our economy working at a faster speed. Millions of Brazilians that never had access to a bank account in the past, now they have access to a bank account through a special program that we developed to increase bank accounts, especially for small accounts. And we developed a financing policy for the workers with loans that is lower than 50% of what they are accustomed to pay in the loan markets, and that is discounted in the payroll that serves as a guarantee, as a collateral for these loans. And more recently, we had the pleasure to announce 118,000 scholarships were allocated in agreement with private universities in my country. We'll make it possible to 118,000 new students be enrolled in these private universities. But even more important than that happened in these last 2 years in my government is that also we assumed the pledge to try to change the world trade geography. And when we talk about this, some would imagine that we would fight with the United States or that we would fight with the European Union. And we said that, first of all, we should have no reason to fight with the European Union because they're a major partner, trade partner with Brazil. Secondly, there was no reason for us to fight the United States that individually is our major trade partner. So what we had to do is to create, to build new partnerships and to build new realities in the world of business, in the business world. And due to that, and only with 2 years of my administration, I traveled to 35 countries. I visited all the South American countries. I visit 10 countries in Africa. I visit 7 countries in the Middle East. I visit India. I went to China. And I visit some South American countries more than once, besides some countries in Europe, too, that I also visit. And we established a policy that is called the Similarity Policy, the policy of those that have the basic same conditions and that many times they have foreign trade that is much more smaller than they could have and that they could develop. And with that, we managed to reach the end of the year 2004 with our trade with some countries from the Middle East growing 70% in a year, and our trade with South America growing 60%, and with the European Union growing 30%. In a vigorous policy, we dismantled a doctrine that existed in Brazil, that we can export what was the surplus in our economy. Either we would follow a major export policy, either we would not abandon that policy and go to the domestic markets. And Brazil never well defined that it would be possible to do the two things at the same time, improving the exports and also developing and making grow the domestic market. And we also did something very important, that was the process to restore and reclaim Mercosur bloc. The Mercosur was weakened, and Mercosur, that many said that it was going to end. Today, Mercosur is even stronger than it was in the past, and even more important than that, all South American countries and even in the Andean community participate very actively as members of the Mercosur. And even more recently in the Cusco city in Peru, we just founded the South American Community of Nations in a demonstration that we can continue to look towards the world, to the rest of the world, but we have to take care of our neighbors, to develop a sound integration of the region, not a theoretical integration, but a physical integration of railroads, of highways, of telecom. And so that's why Brazil has made many good investments to help, together with CAF, that is attending Davos, and with the National Development Bank of Brazil, we're helping develop infrastructure projects in countries like Peru, Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia, and Ecuador, and Argentina, and Uruguay, Paraguay. We've been developing these infrastructure projects because Brazil, as the largest country in South America, has the obligation to make that these infrastructure works. Many of them should be financed by Brazil through its National Development Bank, the BNDES. And the result of all this is that we generated an expectation. Very important expectation was generated in South America, and we even generated expectation beyond South America with the African countries where Brazil had abandoned. Brazil usually looked more towards the United States and towards Europe and was not looking towards Africa. Now we decided that we had an historical debt with Africa. We had to pay back this debt with Africa, and to do that we needed to reestablish our political relations with Africa. And that's why we visit many African countries in these 2 years, and that's why we improved our partnership with Angola, and we improved our partnership with Mozambique, and that's why we improved our partnership with some African countries and those countries that speak Portuguese. And I can say that Mercosur bloc today is stronger. Mercosur today is in better conditions so that it can reach an agreement with the European Union. And we know that it's a very difficult agreement to reach, but it's a necessary agreement so that we can establish more democratic standards in this trade relation. And we have a strong partnership with China that now is a strategic partner in its relations with Brazil. We have a strong partnership with India, and we have a strong partnership with South Africa. Following the rationale of building a new world trade geography, we understand that the more plural is our trade relation and the less dependent we are towards one country or a block of countries, the more opportunity we'll have to avoid that in some moment of crisis in the world we can lose in our trade balance because the country that is importing is facing a difficult situation. So we intend this year to increase. And here we have our Minister of Industry and Development, we have our Foreign Affairs Minister, our Finance Minister is here, the Chief of Staff is here, the Central Bank President, Governor is here too. So we're working hard so that this year I'm more optimistic than my Trade Minister that we can go beyond the $100 billion in our exports. That Minister Furlan understands that we should reach $108 billion for this year, 2005. And even more important than that, that this policy to change, to build a new world trade geography in the world, it has strengthened tremendously when we developed the G20 after the Cancun meeting, and where then we could show the strength in Geneva, and now this group could even show more strength in the negotiations that are underway at the WTO round of Doha round for this year. So that's what I'd like to say, to convey to all of you, that Brazil finally is having the possibility to come to Davos after 2 years to say to all of you, finally Brazil has made the decision to have a sustainable growth cycle and to make it possible also that we can grow for the next 10, 15, 20 years without Brazil trying to undertake any adventure to grow a lot in some years and then go backwards and have no growth in future years. So we're having a strong tight fiscal policy, and we're also following a strong social policy. In these 2 years, our literacy programs reached 5 million adults. In these last 2 years, we have created people's popular drugstores to sell cheaper drugs. In these 2 years, we developed a major dental program, and we also want to end with chronic disease in Brazil in the next 2 years. Just for you to have an idea, in the educational budget for this year, we allocated a budget that will restore 75% of the lost or reduction of budget that we had in the last 10 years for education. And so I could say, Mr. Schwab, and that's why I came to Davos, because tomorrow I have a major meeting with the business community, with investors, to show and present Brazil, what Brazil has to offer. We're having an investors meeting tomorrow, and what are the opportunities Brazil can offer for those that want to invest, either from the fiscal stability viewpoint, either from the economic stability viewpoint. And at the same time, we know that with the economic stability, with the guarantee that Brazil will have sustainable growth, it's much more easier, will be more easier for us to resolve the social problems, the social issues that have accrued for more than 1 century in our country. So I come back to Davos 2 years after, coming from Porto Alegre, from the World Social Forum, even more optimistic, with even more certainty that Brazil will not throw away this opportunity that the historic moment and the political moment is given to us, that Brazil will continue to grow, will continue to generate jobs. Brazil will increase the wages, will continue to do income distribution, and will continue to build this international force so that we can have much more weight in the trade negotiations with much more partners thinking in the same way and acting in the same way so that we can protect ourselves.
To protect ourselves from the economic power of some of our partners who negotiated with, above all, in the WTO. That's why after 2 years, I'm back to say to the President, to say to my Brazilian friends, to the business leaders, to say to all who are interested that you can believe it. The Mercosur today is a stronger reality than it ever was, that the integration of South America is stronger now than it has ever been, and much more than all that. The soundness, the solidity of Brazil is much stronger than it has ever been in the past. That is why I am very happy to be back here. I'm happy, and I am open now for those who would like to ask questions so that we can bring even more clarity. And business leaders who would like to be with us tomorrow will have a big discussion on the Brazilian economy with several ministers making presentations, the Minister of the Economy, Minister of Industry, Commerce, Infrastructure. And if you're curious to know about Brazil's potential, tomorrow morning we'll be at the Belvedere Hotel having that discussion. Thank you.
You certainly will agree with me it's great what great leadership can achieve. Nobody would have believed that such a progress is possible when you addressed us 2 years ago. I would like to also express our appreciation to the team which has supported you and the ministers who are here, the head of the central bank. You have, as the President said, you have tomorrow the opportunity at the Belvedere Hotel to go into details. So we will have no discussion now, except I would like to highlight again that I admire you, Mr. President, for having so successfully combined economic development and social progress. I think you have really established here a role model, and let's not forget, under relatively difficult conditions 2 years ago. Now it's a little bit brighter, but the global economy was not in its best state 2 years ago. We also should commend you for the very positive and constructive leadership you have taken on the international scene. One thing which I particularly appreciated, because it expresses the spirit of the World Economic Forum so well, is your commitment to public-private partnerships and to the law which you just passed to integrate the private business community much more into the development process. Mr. President, one question before you leave. If you come back here in 2 years, what would be the single most important achievement you would like to tell us in 2007? Will it be that you have been admitted to the Security Council, or what will it be?
Primeiro, eu tenho compromisso.
First of all, my commitment in my inaugural address, January 1st, 2003, was that at the end of my term, all Brazilians were eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner then I would feel that I could die in peace. But I was lucky in these past 2 years, first of all, because I was able to put together a team in my government of colleagues of the very high competence and very loyal to me. And secondly, not just because I had the chance to come to Davos, but 6 months later I had the chance to be invited to go to Evian to the G8 plus 12 meeting when 20 countries were present, and that was another chance I had to raise the issue of hunger and poverty for a discussion, because over the years I became convinced that if we don't make hunger and poverty a political problem, there will be no solution. We'll have businessmen collaborating, we'll have some governments taking measures here and there, we'll have churches helping, but there won't be the structural changes we need so that in another 30 years, no one more will be dying of malnutrition or hungry in the world. So that gave me some projection in the world at that time. And then we decided to create a kind of a new, what we call a new geography. That's not arrogance. It's that we perceived something that I learned in the union movement. If you've got an adversary or a negotiator on the other side of the table who's very strong, you can't complain to him. You have to be strong enough to bargain with them. So I tried to put together a bloc that would represent overall part of the strength of the European Union, part of the strength of for us to sit down to be counterparts, stronger counterparts when we discuss with Europe and the U.S. And we've increased the amount of respect for my country, for myself. People that I didn't like, I learned to respect as heads of state. And now we really want to democratize the United Nations, because if the UN were more democratized and more countries were on the Security Council of the UN, then we would not have had the Iraq war as we had it by the unilateral decision of a single country. So I believe that Brazil, Japan, Germany, and India can participate in the Security Council. There are countries in Africa that can participate. There are other countries in South America that could participate. What cannot be allowed to happen is for the UN to go on operating like it did in the post-Second World War. Everything has changed in the world since then, and so the UN has to change its organizations. So my dream, if I do come back here next year or the year after, to come back, who knows, with a certainty of being able to tell you that we are participating in the UN if the reform is approved. We are wanting more participation in the WTO because Brazil is an important country, and all these international organizations where we can have influence to make them work better, you can be certain that we will try to participate. Brazil has become a very active political player. We don't miss any meetings. We'll go to all of them that we're invited to, and wherever we have a chance to speak about the things that affect our country and to show things about our country, will be certain that we'll be there.
Thank you again for your statesmanship, and again an invitation to all of you to join the President and his cabinet tomorrow morning. Mr. President, I mentioned that we probably did not dream what could be achieved in 2 years. But I would also venture to say, when you came here the first time, Mr. President, you certainly did not assume that 2 years later, this group here, those 1,000 participants who participated in the town hall meeting on Wednesday, business community, would put poverty and poverty eradication at the top of the global agenda. I think here the minds have met, and again, Mr. President, we thank you very much for joining us again in Davos, and we hope that you will be back in 2 years or in 1 year with the good news that what you have built has continued to grow, and your dream concerning the UN, we wish you all that it may be a reality. Thank you.
I'll only come if there's good news. The good news, you'll find out anyway through the press.